So before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to share a few thoughts with you. As we said, at the Opportunity Coalition, we find our identity in serving Colorado's communities through enterprise, entrepreneurship, and collaboration. I'm sure it's safe to say that each of us here intend to create opportunity and connection for all those we work and interact with on a daily basis. This, to me, is the linchpin of community, reaching out, making connections, and fully participating in order to help improve our society. Tonight, we will engage in just that as we hear from one of Colorado's community media leaders. Hyper-local. Hyper-local, not a word that I often throw around on a daily basis, but hyper-local media usually refers to reported information that centers on a specific, defined community, offering stories that are tailor-made to their specific interests and needs. This media serves the community by attending to their issues with more complexity and detail than a large newspaper ever could. This evening, I'd like to offer a few thoughts on this topic and its fundamental principle, which is central to each of us. Number one, clickbait really isn't that great. Yes, we had to put a little rhyme in there. That's about as good as I can do as a commercial real estate guy. So, many media gurus today will say that the only successful news is the sensational, attention grabber that will shock the average person into clicking or reading. How many articles do we see over and over again where it's the next greatest calamity and it's happening on a daily basis? And they're doing that because they constantly want to get your attention. Vice, Huffington Post, Politico, BuzzFeed, Mashable, and a few other digital media sites are taking over the national media scene. In fact, they have created about 60% of the digital journalism jobs in just the past 5 years alone. But what is missing from this kind of broadcast is one aspect of the human experience that only local news can cover with the deep, rich journalism it deserves. The living, breathing, messy, and necessary intricacies of the immediate community around us, our local community. Number two, local news speaks to us in a way that national news just simply can't. Native news speaks in local dialects, colors, and tones. So for instance, when I'm on the East Coast doing business and I start talking about wanting a pop or getting a sack or going up to the high country or saying, "you bet," they laugh at me and like, what in the world are you talking about? And then my friends down in the South, when they throw out the old y'all, and then the one I've never really figured out, the y'all, which I'm wondering how many y'alls is that? But I'm sure it's several. I figured that out. There's a certain identity expressed by this locale-specific media that defines and informs a particular group of people that still live and work in the same vicinity. It can be nuanced and specific, unlike broad media, which allows these connected people to become aware and informed about local issues for which they could have opinions if they only knew about them. It takes a great deal of courage to be journalistically honest. Think about that, journalistically honest, in a community of people who know you and know one another. It was the Tabor City Tribune in North Carolina that wrote against the Ku Klux Klan in the 1950s. Before doing so was kosher. The editor, W. Horace Carter, persisted as his community's voice against the KKK, despite death threats and ultimate isolation from a large number of people who disagreed with him. In the end, however, his commitment to providing discussion and facts in his community won him the Pulitzer Prize, because mankind values those who can fight for the people in their community. And I would add to that, they value especially those who have a little or no voice at all. Think about people in our community today who have little or no voice at all, but we can help give them that platform. It is daring and difficult to subject oneself to community, but ascribing value to the people is absolutely essential. Local journalism doesn't start with a deadline. It starts with community connection and knowledge. We have Scotty Iverson here tonight, and she's always writing stories about the local community right here in Greenwood Village and surrounding areas. She knows about those because she's here, because she's breaking bread with people and living life with them. It means engaging with people, serving their needs for information and relationship, and providing an opportunity for discussion that will improve and edify a group of people looking to thrive. Furthermore, there is a meaningful, sensitive balance in local reporting, how a newspaper chooses to present a national crisis alongside the story about the local high school baseball team or a new local nonprofit in town says something about being human. We must learn to harbor global disasters alongside of the smaller victories and cataclysms of daily life. And we are called to serve and communicate with people around us in the midst of these realities. Number 3, hyperlocal media is able to put community before crunch time. Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Paul Ryan once commented, "Every successful individual knows that his or her achievement depends on a close community of persons working together." Novel concept, huh? Local journalism relies on this kind of collaboration in order to succeed. The reporters must put themselves in the line of fire in order to pursue good, true comments, since the people they write about literally may live next door. In the end, they must tell the truth or struggle, because the people who are reading really care that they get it right. Shouldn't we all strive to tell the truth in this way? After all, our relationships are how we participate in something bigger or greater than ourselves. We should be unceasing and insistent about the ideas spinning around in our local sphere of people, because our ideologies tie us together and guide us forward. As we hear from the owner and CEO of Colorado Community Media, Mr. Jerry Healey, may we remember to cherish the communities in which we live and the opportunities they provide to know, serve, and support one another. So for those that don't know much about our speaker, let me read his bio to you. Jerry is the owner and publisher of Colorado Community Media, as I said. This builds stronger communities by helping people enjoy a better life through creating relevant and useful connections. It does this by delivering hyper-local content. We all know what hyper-local is now. If you don't, I can go through the 3 points again, but I know you don't want me to 16 Denver metro communities through its 17 print publications, websites, social media, and digital offerings. It has more than 300,000 weekly readers and is Colorado's largest local community outlet. Jerry has been involved in publishing on and off since graduating from Northeastern University with a degree in marketing. His first positions were with the Miami Herald and then the Providence Journal. In 1990, he purchased his first weekly newspaper with his wife, Ann, and through acquisitions built it to 3. In 1997, he sold the newspapers, and Jerry worked with the new owners helping to create Colorado Community Newspapers. In 2000, Jerry received a Master's of Science in Management degree from the University of Denver, where he later became an adjunct professor. He owned a Vail-based high-end glass and mirror shop, was a mergers and acquisition advisor, and a volunteer with the Rocky Mountain Clean Tech Open. At the Clean Tech Open, he trained startups how to succeed with their solar, biofuels, battery storage, air, and water businesses, and helped launch more than 50 startups that have raised millions of dollars. And I would add to that, created many jobs and put lots of bread on people's tables. In 2012, he formed Colorado Community Media. During the past 4 years, the company has integrated operations, launched new websites, redesigned print products, rolled out many digital advertising offerings, and increased Colorado Press Association awards fourfold. A little-known fact is that Colorado Community Media has 5 newspapers more than 100 years old, with the oldest being the Golden Transcript, celebrating its 150th anniversary this year. With that, help me welcome Jerry to the front.
Thank you very much. Well, that was a great introduction. Thank you, Brian, and thank you to the Coalition for inviting me today. John Brackney, thank you for making the recommendation to have me be a speaker. Saw the speaker list, and I'm honored just to be on that list. That the speakers that are coming after me, it's amazing, and the ones that have come before me. As Brian said, I'm the CEO and owner of Colorado Community Media, and what I'm going to do today is kind of take you through a journey that I've been on for the last 25 years. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. As I get through this, though, as I get through in my introduction about what I've been doing and how I got here, I'm going to take you through my 10 lessons that I've learned in turnaround management and try to weave in what's going on in the media business and weave in what's going on in Colorado community media so you have a better understanding of what we're trying to do and where kind of we see the future going. And I think we're open up for Q&A as long as I don't go over on my time. We will open up for Q&A, and I met with some C-level executives beforehand, and the questions are great, and hopefully they'll be as good for that part. So for me personally, my first turnaround decision was after high school. And what you see here is about the size I was when I was 14 years old. So I was a big kid, right? And I thought for sure, I'm going to be picked up for a D1 college scholarship, and I'm going to be playing in the pros, and at 14 years old, so I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to my grades. And when I graduated high school, I didn't get those offers, and I realized I had to pivot myself and transition myself. So I went to the best school I could, which was Northeast University, which over the years has become a top 50 business school. Then it was a pretty good school, but that was a turning point for me because of the cooperative education program. You might hear me come back to John a few times, but John and I went out to Northeastern and visited the cooperative education program because that's really what got me started. It was a good program, a good business school, but I managed to work for the federal government as a 19-year-old going for 6 months, jumping on the Long Island Railroad, going to Midtown Manhattan, and went to St. Thomas, St. John, to work with what they called the CEDAR program, which was Jimmy Carter's job program, and I audited those in places like Harlem and other places in New York City, and that was just a wonderful learning experience for a 19-year-old. The next job I had was with General Electric, and that was a big corporation, and it still is a big corporation, and that was a wonderful opportunity too for me because I was working with executives and other people, but I was working in the lighting program, which is still going strong for GE. So when I graduated to 5 years, I really turned my education around. It didn't start off so strong. By the time I graduated, I had professors tell me I was one of the best students they ever had. So I found something within me that I didn't know was there, and that was my first turnaround. Second turnaround, it's a stroke of luck. I went to work for the Miami Herald Publishing Company. It was a deal where they came to Northeastern to recruit, and they offered me the opportunity to fly down to Miami, and it was April, it was spring break, and I was like, let's do that, And I flew down to Miami. They offered me the job. They went through a lot of different candidates. I also had an offer for AT&T in Manhattan. Thought for sure I was going back to Manhattan. Got off the plane in Boston, and it was snowing. And I was like, maybe, single guy, Miami, newspapers wouldn't be so bad. Well, I took that job over the higher paying AT&T job. And it turned out to be a great thing because I love the business, and I still love the business. And it was a management development program for Knight Ridder, so I did all kinds of different things, including I was in the press room, and they let me do most anything just to sort of get my feet underneath me. Then I went to the Providence Journal, and that's where things started to turn. That was the bad boss syndrome. Anybody ever have a bad boss that sort of, you knew at that point you had to leave? But I managed to stay there for 5 years. But at that point, I decided to become an entrepreneur. And via Chicago, we wound up here in Littleton. My wife and I did a consulting thing in Chicago, and we got on a train to look at the paper out here in Littleton. There was one little paper, Littleton Times. We had sold our house in Rhode Island. We were using the proceeds from that. One of the things I didn't mention at Northeastern is that I was able to put myself through college and pretty much paid for 80% of my own college education through the cooperative education program and loans. So for us to buy our first paper, we had to pretty much sell our house, which is what we did. And we came out here to Littleton, which was just a welcoming community. And it had everything we were looking for, except for at first the geographic location, because we thought we'd be back east. But we wound up here. Had a baby. And next thing you know, I was looking at my wife going, what am I doing? Because we had this one little paper. We were pretty much paying everybody but ourselves. Entrepreneurs understand that. And and long and behold, I read in the paper the next day not next day, but within a few weeks, that the Sentinel newspaper publishing group was going for sale. Anybody remember those days? It was corporately owned, all the papers that surrounded Denver. We ended up buying their South group, and in 7 years, pretty much quadrupled revenues and profits, and then I had VC-backed newspaper groups inquiring about buying us. Colorado's economy in 1990 was pretty much still in the tank, but starting to come out. And by 1997, we were on everybody's radar list. So we bought those papers, turned them around, sold them, and as John and I like to talk, I found that pretty easy to turn those papers around, build them, and find a buyer. And then I went to DU, got the graduate degree in business. Started off in the MBA program, but later catered it to Master of Science in Entrepreneurship. And a man named Gordon von Stroh was a South Metro Denver professor at a DU. He was a turning point for me because the MBA was just too structured for me. It was like, take these courses, and I was full-time, so I was with a lot of younger folks who had no business experience. I didn't do the executive MBA. Gordon was great. He pulled me over and said, Jerry, go home, have a glass of Merlot, look through the course book, tell me what courses you want to take, make a name for it, and tell me why I should sign off on it. I mean, how great is that, right? So you're looking through the entire university course book, not just business, entire university. And I came back and said, these are the courses I want to take. Let's call it Master of Science in Entrepreneurship with an emphasis on e-commerce and education. He was like, okay. So I had a lot of fun with that for the next year. So I got through that, so that's why it's called the Master of Science in Management and not an MBA. Although I did take the first year MBA, so I kind of have an MBA too. Did some teaching, consulting. John Mullins, a mentor of mine at DU, was the finance professor at DU in the entrepreneurship program in particular. He taught a course called Managing the Growing Business. He asked me to teach it for him because he went to the London School of Economics. I did that for a couple of years, and then DU changed its emphasis from entrepreneurship being focused on people starting businesses to entrepreneurship helping their graduates be more entrepreneurial within a large corporation. So they kind of phased out what we were doing. So I moved on to working with the Clean Tech Open and buying a glass business in Vail. When we mean by high-end glass businesses, that for the most part we were doing like the beautiful Euro showers. We had one house in the Eagle Vale that was a $110,000 installation of glass. So every time the homeowner came off the private jet into the Eagle Airport, they would take the designer and say, let's add this, let's add that. I like to do yoga, so I want nice background light for the yoga, but I want to be able to open it up if I want to do Zuma and don't want to go crazy. So it was those were the kinds of things that we did. We did also the fog window units too, but that's kind of boring. So sold that, and then a friend of mine asked me to come back and help him turn around the North and the West newspapers while I was doing my M&A work. And I said, that sounds pretty interesting, and again, that's going to be easy. I've done it before, it's going to be easy. Well, it really wasn't so easy. And so I'm going to start to draw upon, the Clean Tech Open was kind of a fun thing for me because I jumped in with both feet, and I helped find the mentors for the startups. I did a lot of the teaching for the startups. I also coordinated the business people who sat down and evaluated the financials or their marketing plans or marketing strategies. So it was pretty much a full-time job for 2 or 3 years, and then I started to phase out of that. So lesson 1. Draw upon your network, education, business, and life experience as you embark on this journey. That's kind of what I went through here on my background. So my suggestion there is to draw, has anybody done a turnaround? Managed a turnaround? We got a couple of heads, okay. It's an interesting thing. Right now we're mostly dealing with how to manage a growing business in the Denver area, and that's got its own challenges because you can really mess up a growing business too. But for the most part, I think that hopefully turnaround management doesn't come back in vogue because hopefully we just keep on this, but I think it's going to come back eventually. But making good decisions is a must, and you need to draw upon all of your experiences in life, your business, your education, and your personal life to accomplish that. Lesson 2, find your sense of purpose. Good decision making is a must. Why is it important to find your sense of purpose? This is not easy work doing turnarounds. You got to lay people off. You got to change directions. You are going to upset your creditors. It is not easy work. So you need to have your sense of purpose. In my business, at this point, for the newspapers, that's a fairly easy thing to do. But I wanted to explain to you some of the things that is our sense of purpose in the newspaper business, particularly in the community newspaper business. It's about our tradition. As Brian said, we have 5 newspapers over 100 years old. The Golden Transcript is 150 years old. That sounds pretty old, but I want to put that in perspective in Colorado's history. The paper started in 1866. In 1865, the Colorado War ended. Colorado history buffs might know that that was the war between the Cheyenne and Arapaho Indians with the white settlers and the territorial troops in Colorado. So if you look at that, that's pretty wild, wild west still at that point. It just ended. Also, I mentioned the Colorado territorial capital was in Golden. I didn't mention that, but it was in Golden. But why is it the Colorado territorial capital? Because Colorado wasn't a state for like another 10 years. So this paper started 10 years before Colorado was a state and just after the war with the Indians ended. It wasn't a proud time in our history that we had a war with the Native Americans, but I wanted to put it in perspective of just how old our tradition is here. Our values. I believe that newspapering is part of the general democracy of what we do. And I'm going to read a little bit, so I'll have to forgive me here. But what's the first thing that a dictatorship does when they take over? They take over the media. There's a good reason for that. Because if you control the media, you control the message. And so it's about the democracy. The founders of our country envisioned newspapers as the watchdogs of our democracy. And that mission was cemented by the First Amendment, that it was the only for-profit business given protection at that point under the Constitution, was the media, the newspapers, and the free press. Without strong community newspapers, an FCC report said we'll have an increase in the likelihood of problems that are associated with lack of accountability in government. One of the other things that I'd like to talk to you about really briefly is that the government is creating its own content. One of the things that the digital world has provided is the ability for local governments, state governments, even to a certain extent the federal government, to send their message directly to you. Now, if you're sitting in if I have any local government people here, I apologize, but that's probably a good thing if you're sitting in local government. Their number one complaint that they hear is that the constituents weren't communicated to. That's the number one thing. You made a decision without me knowing it. So they want to communicate directly. But I'll challenge you to say that we have an issue right now. When I sit down with the public information officers in South Metro Denver, they outnumber my reporters 5 to 6 to 1. And every year I hear about another city adding 1 to 2 positions in their information department. And they're paying better than we pay. So I've lost 3 journalists in the last year to those jobs because they pay 50 to 60% better sometimes, plus they get better benefits. So the local government's creating their own content. This is kind of a fun cover. I don't know if you probably can't see this, but this is essentially a journalist sitting at a desk with a helmet on with this big creature over them. And the headline says, "Beware of predators. It's time for journalists to guard their front lines." I think I love this cover, but just a little bit of information in here on it I'll share with you. In 2004, for every person in PR, there were 3.2. Actually, there were 3.2 people in 2004 in PR, and for every journalist. Today, it's 4.6 PR specialists for every journalist. But to give that a better idea, in 2000, and I know this is the spread's gotten bigger. In 2013, there were 202,000 PR specialists versus 43,000 journalists. So we're starting to see that trend go more and more towards PR. We get inundated with companies trying to say, please run this, do that, again, like one of the cities that we live in, or we support, actually more than one, love a product called Nextdoor, and they call what they put on Nextdoor news, and I would beg to differ. That is not news. There's a big difference between news and what people put on Nextdoor. Nextdoor is about garage sales, about finding a babysitter, and about your city directly communicating with you without a filter. So that's why I wanted to come back to, is one of the things that I see here for my sense of purpose is about democracy and being the watchdog of the communities. We also build relationships. This is my third part of my sense of purpose. We inspire community. So you might say, how do we do that? One of the pieces we did recently, I realize it was right there. One of the pieces we did recently was on hunger. Before we went with this story, no one knew that there were 637 students in Douglas County that are considered homeless in the last year. Douglas County is the 8th wealthiest county in the country, the only county that's not on the east or the west coast that's in the top 10. There were 637 students that were living out of cars or living at somebody else's home or being supported in some way that would be considered homeless last year. We broke that story, we went with it, we made a big difference for a group that's raising money for that cause. Another story was about a World War II vet. I'm going to read a little bit from this piece to you. The burly Vietnam veteran walked up to Jack Frank, 90, a World War II vet facing the frightening quandary of living longer than he can support himself. You the vet I just donated to, he asked, sticking out his hand. I'm Bud. I appreciate it, Jack said, grabbing Bud Bacati's hand. So you're World War II, said Bacati, who served in the Army and received 2 Purple Hearts. My dad was at Normandy, the Italian campaign. We were in the Pacific, answered Jack, a mechanic with the Marines' Amphibious Battalion Division. Bacati, a Santa-like beard wrapping his face, looked steadily into Jack's alert blue eyes. So he asked, what's your situation? Situation is this. In about 4 months, he and his wife Judy, 69, expect to run out of money. That in itself is shameful to any of our elders, including those who have fought for this country's freedoms, should they find themselves fearing the days ahead because there isn't enough money in the bank. There is shame, too, for the government may have failed Jack, unaware of his benefits as a World War II veteran. Here's a man running out of money, a World War II veteran, and there are benefits out there for these people. He doesn't even know about it. So what happened after we ran this story is that Congressman Kaufman and other people got involved with this gentleman and said, here's how you find those funds. So we're making a difference in people's lives, and we are connecting them to the community. Another story I'll just briefly tell you about, we recently did, is that Douglas County has some differences of opinion on how to fix their aging and sometimes crumbling schools. Crumbling might be too strong a word after what we know what's going on in Detroit. But they have a need, and there's a big differences of opinion. What we did in that story was we explained both sides, what the issues are, how much money has to be raised, and what we have to do. So when I tell you about sense of purpose, I wanted to explain my sense of purpose because it's needed, and I'm going to tell you why now. Because lesson 3 as a turnaround manager is it's probably worse than you think, and there's a lot of surprises coming. I'm going to share with you some things tonight that I pretty much haven't shared with too many people about what I went through. Day 1, when I came in to turn around the North and the West papers, the owner said goodbye. I was in charge. I made a motivational speech to the employees. We're going to go get them. We're going to do great. We have a great paper. We have a great history. We have great markets. We're going to make this happen. We're going to do this together. Okay. I go to a private meeting with one of the managers. We have $3,000 in the bank, and on Friday we have a $100,000 payroll. Okay, I kind of knew it was bad, but that's really bad. All right. And oh, by the way, all the employees run to the bank to cash their checks because they know that whoever gets there last, their check's going to bounce. All right. Now, I go to lunch. Oh, by the way, I failed to mention, the bookkeeper up until today was the owner's new wife in Kansas, and they're known to spend all the money, so we can't trust them. So we're shutting off we nearly shut off their password. I already shut off the signature for the previous owner, so they couldn't sign anymore. I go to lunch, come back from lunch, and there's an eviction notice on our north office. You have 3 days to get out. Okay? Call over to the west office. How many empty desks we have? 25 desks. Okay, in 3 days we're going to move over. How much stuff do we have in the north office? A lot of stuff. I mean, things I couldn't believe. We had an old press, one of those historic press sitting in the warehouse of this old office that I was told I had to get out or I was going to get locked up in there, and then it's now in a museum. So those are the kinds of things we had to deal with. So I was like, all right, hire temp workers, get a couple of dumpsters in here. We're going to make this happen in 3 days. In 3 days, we were out of there. Landlord happened to tell me later on that he was only trying to get my attention. He succeeded. And, oh, the charity's got a lot of stuff. So the next 30 days, my phone rings, and it's a U.S. Postal Inspector. I don't know what U.S. Postal Inspectors do. He walks in and says he has a subpoena for us. This postal inspector has a badge on his chest and a gun on his hip. We meet, and he gives me a subpoena with like 23 things they need done in the next 30 days from us. Then we get a call from the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor is started to do an audit because they're concerned that the benefits haven't been paid, and we're not doing things by the Labor's Board's thing. So the owner works on the Department of Justice stuff. U.S. Post Office stuff. I work on the Department of Labor, as well as trying to get this thing turned around really quickly. And I'm also dealing with the creditors. I mean, right away they found out that there's a new boss in town, and they start calling me, when am I going to get paid, and blah, 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 blah. So my goal is to make sure the employees get paid, the IRS gets paid. Those are number 1 and 2. So during the next 60 days, I'm on my way to a Clean Tech Open meeting. I'm in my car, and the phone rings. And this is pretty sad. The owner's gone. Died. We won't go into details. He's in his low 40s. The employees were very close to this man. So what do you have to do? I'd turn around. I was going to downtown Denver. I had to go tell the employees that the owner's gone. This is all within the first 60 days. Later on that afternoon, the phone rings. It's his wife in Kansas. She wants money. We hear through the grapevine that possibly the divorce was never finalized in Colorado. I call my attorney and say, there's a potential that there's 2 women involved in this, and they both might think that they are married to this gentleman still. The attorney goes, don't send either one of them money. We got to figure this out. My phone keeps ringing from Kansas. She wants money. It's not going to happen. She finally gets the hint. I go take a drive to clear my mind that afternoon, and I wind up in Central City because I was in the Golden office, and it's this beautiful drive. If you haven't taken that drive to Central City from Golden, do it. I'm in Golden. I go sit down and have lunch. I was hardly hungry, but I did take a bourbon that day, and I never drink at lunch. If you know me, I'm not a drinker at lunch, but I had a bourbon that day at lunch. The Department of Justice takes over the postal case. This is now within the next 3 months. Department of Justice takes over the how am I doing on time? I don't know. What time is it? Oof, I better move along. Department of Justice takes over the postal case. They call us in, and I go to the downtown Denver with an attorney, and I walk through the metal detector, and I walk into the conference room, and there's Eric Holder's picture on the wall, the U.S. flag, the whole thing. There's 2 attorneys from the U.S. government. There's an accountant from the U.S. government, and I'm on the phone with an attorney in Washington, and the very first thing they say is, the position of the United States of America is that you owe us $6 million. All right, well, I got the keys. I don't own this. I'm out of here. Oh, no, we'll negotiate. Well, they did negotiate with us, but those are the kinds of things I just wanted to mention to you, is that there's a lot of surprises when you take over a turnaround. When you walk in there, expect that you don't know the whole picture, that there's skeletons in the closet, and there's more to come. Lesson number 4, high-performing employees welcome you, others don't. I think this one's pretty obvious. The ones that are doing a great job are really happy that you're here. You're going to save the company. You're going to help them save the company. The ones that don't start They start positioning. Hopefully they're looking for jobs. I tried to make that obvious, that if you don't have a lot to do here, maybe you should look for a job, because we are about ready to start scaling this thing back. So one of the things you have to decide pretty early on is who stays, who goes. Keep your eyes, one of my suggestions is keep your eyes open, because who you think might be working a lot might not be. They even fool their supervisors. So keep your eyes open, keep your door open, get out there and work with the people. Don't be sitting in your office trying to figure this out. You need to get out there and do it. Lesson number 5, the SWOT analysis is not just an academic exercise. You're going to get so much information thrown at you over the first month or two. You need to compartmentalize this information somehow or another. And that strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is a great way to start to put things in buckets. Because you need to build on your strengths. You've got to capitalize on those opportunities. Some weaknesses you have to overcome. That's hard to do in the first 60 days, 90 days. But you need to know what your weaknesses are, and you're darn well to know who your threats are. So it's really important that you go through this exercise, but then when you're starting to do it, is start to put things in buckets. Lesson 6, determine early on if you can succeed. If not, leave. I'm not going to go into lesson 7 yet. Don't hit it. But lesson 7, you're going to kind of see why. But you have to be able to succeed, otherwise leave. Find somebody else. If in my situation, my sense of purpose was so strong that there were times I wasn't sure if I was going to succeed. And the other thing is that the owner was gone, so I had nobody to turn this over to. I mean, if I could have, there were days that if he was still here, I would have said, "Here, it's back to you. I'm out." But my sense of purpose was strong, and he was gone. These employees needed me, and I stayed. But if you're not going to succeed, get out. Lesson 7. The federal government is not compassionate. Neither are most creditors. But the creditors are nicer than the federal government. Who would have ever thought? The federal government, these bureaucrats, they do it by the book, and they don't care about it. They have this tunnel vision of this is what they can do, this is how they can do it, and it doesn't really matter that you're saving jobs, that you are now paying all the IRS fees and taxes and trust fund money and everything else. All this particular individual cares about is what happened in the past and when am I getting that money. So this was one of the craziest things that anybody ever heard, but the trust fund money, if you don't know what that is, the trust fund money is when a company deducts your taxes from your paycheck. That's considered trust fund money to the federal government. It's kind of like the trust that the company is actually going to deduct it and pay it to the federal government. Most businesses in trouble probably haven't paid that, and that's the case with this. This was 3 years going back. They owed federal government money. I knew going in that I could be responsible for anything that I didn't pay from the day I walked in, because I was now the signatory on all the checks. So it was my responsibility to make sure the government got paid. It wasn't there for the first 90 days. I figured I would have plenty of time to pay it back. Well, I got a letter saying that they were going to try to get me for all the previous checks that weren't paid on a personal level. We went to attorneys. They said that's not possible. That's not going to happen. We're going to win. We didn't win. So my wife and I go on the hook for $130,000 personally for something we had nothing to do with. And we're still paying that down. So I kept making the case to the federal government. I talked to my House of Representatives. I won't say which one. And we sat down, and they said they go to bat for me. This is crazy. You're paying your trust funds now. You're saving the newspapers. You're saving jobs. This is an unreasonable thing that they're doing to you. Didn't matter. It just didn't matter. So they're very, very tunnel visioned on what they do. So if you ever do a turnaround, make sure you pay your trust fund. Make sure you pay your trust funds. Not only what you're doing when you're in there, but try to go back as fast as you can. Hindsight being 20/20, I would have cut faster, so I could have paid the government off first. The Department of Justice is still going on. We settled with them for $100,000. And like I said, the IRS, forget about it. Lesson 8, act fast. Balance toughness with kindness. We kind of talked a little bit about that. You got to act fast. If you're a turnaround manager, you got to go in there and you got to start making decisions. You got to get it done very quickly. And if you don't, there's going to be heck to pay. But one of the things that's really important is what I've learned a lot about laying people off. And that is the toughness with kindness. If you've run a business, you've probably laid somebody off in your life. Here's my suggestion on that. Do it at the end of the day. Close the door. Have a box of tissues there. And don't make it about you. If you say things like, this is really hard on me to do this, or, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm not going to sleep. This is really, they don't want to hear that. They just got laid off. So it's not about you. Say some nice words about the individual. Get it done. Get it done as nicely as you can. Get it done as quickly as you can. Have that box of tissues handy, because I had to use them very, very many times. Lesson 9, cost cutting is rarely enough. Back to undergraduate school, the 4 Ps of marketing. It's really important that you get a marketing strategy. What we learned along the way is that my forecasts that were based on historic forecasts were totally off. There were some things out of our control. One is that in the newspaper world, a lot's moved to digital and online. That accelerated in the last 5 years. The second one is that a lot of our revenue was based upon foreclosures. We run, every foreclosure that happens has to run in a legal newspaper 3 times or 4 times. They're not a lot of money each, but in 2008, that was a lot of money to us. That revenue dropped off by 80%, if not more, in the last 5 years, which equaled about 25% of our revenue. We couldn't forecast that in 2011. The public trustees were saying it was going to come back, that there were foreclosures in the pipeline that were going to come out, and all this stuff. We couldn't afford, so it's really important to make sure that you put a good marketing strategy together. So that comes right back to the 4 Ps. Spend a lot of time on sales. Meet with the salespeople. Go on sales calls. Find out what's going on in your market. Lesson 10, the go-forward strategy. Don't be wrong, and communicate it, and communicate it, and communicate it. That's the basic word of a CEO, is you have to make sure you communicate well to your team, and that's really important. I mentioned some of these before. Be visible. Open your door. Company-wide meetings. We called the first one the go-forward strategy. We called the second one CCM 2.0. We called the third one reaching new heights. If you haven't done this, we had our company-wide meeting at the Colorado Mountain School in Golden. It's the old Golden High School. They have a museum for rock climbing in the lower level. You can't bring any drinks in there, but it's great. You can go in and see how Hilliard, the first one who climbed Everest, or one of the first. Yeah, you can see his path and a big, beautiful model. You can see some of the equipment that people use for K2. It's just a wonderful asset. So we started that there, and we called it Reaching New Heights. And we started it down there, and then we brought a speaker in of someone who took 3 attempts to climb Everest. And he talks about his sense of purpose and what it took for him to get up Everest, and why he almost failed the 3rd time, but his sense of purpose is what got him to the top. And he both first 2 times failed within, I want to say, a mile and a half. Apparently they get so beat up in the last mile and a half is so hard on them that he almost turned around again the 3rd time. But it was his mission and sense of purpose that got it to the top. And we tried to share that with the employees of why we're here and what we're doing. So how are we doing? Last year we had our highest profit in 4 years. We've diversified our product offerings. One of the things that's been beneficial for us is that the internet's our friend at this point. Where it hurt us so much, now we can take a print campaign and layer on all these digital offerings, and what advertisers are seeing is that it helps them. We can geofence around a car dealership and say, anyone who's in this car dealership, if they're looking at their phone, they may get served an ad if you're in a Dodge dealership for another Dodge dealer. Or if they're looking at, if you might try to guess that person's looking at an SUV, so you might get served a Chevrolet Suburban ad while you're sitting in the car dealership. We can really precisely target areas within a community or email campaigns based upon interest or whatever. So now we're starting to see all these different digital advertising tools that we offer, and we have the trust of our community because we're not just selling the last gadget and gizmo, and that's not all we sell. We sell the whole package. So we can go in there and we have that trust. So the internet's becoming our friend, which has been good. We're finding that advertisers are confused. There's so many things out there. And people are now hit with 5,000 messages a day. And it's just hard to cut through all that clutter. So businesses are confused about what to do with all this. And our reps can help them with that. We're training them extensively. We're a little bit behind the Denver Post and some of the larger groups, but they've been doing that for a couple of years of layering this all on and training the reps to do a total market, a total package. But we're the only ones that can sell print. So that's what differentiates us, because a lot of people can sell the tools that we're selling online, but we're the only one that can sell print. Costs are up, sales are flat. We have a challenge this year. That's one of the reasons why we're doing a lot of training on the digital side. The good news is this: we've had some major retailers contact us recently. Kohl's Media CEO, I haven't found it yet, but I've heard that recently said that one of the reasons why they think their numbers are down is because they pulled out of print too quickly. We're hearing the word, it's being coined now, digital fatigue. All generations are facing this, where they're on their phones, they're on their computer, they're on their tablet, they're on. And when they get home, they don't necessarily want to turn on another electric device, so they want to read something on print on paper. We're just starting to see that trend back. That's promising. But we have our papers online, we have our papers on the mobile phone, we have our information everywhere. We have to be an all of the above strategy. There are a lot of new digital products coming. We do a lot of revenue generating ideas on our website, to the point right now where all of our print ads are optimized for the web. We also have the way for, with all these PR people that are looking for ways to get their message out, we have ways to do that on our website. We have a new calendar that's going online that's helping the businesses get the word out about events they're having. Those are all paid options for us. There's been more interest in newspaper acquisitions in the last year than anyone's seen for a very long time. And there's a lot of new money coming in. We saw that Bezos bought the Washington Post a few years ago. We saw that there's a wealthy family that bought the Boston Globe. Warren Buffett's been interested in newspapering. He's starting to buy. And now we're starting to see even a younger group. When we run a reporter's position, we're shocked how many young people want to get into the newspaper business. So we're starting to see a little bit of a trend back towards interest in what we do, and I'm really happy to see that. Denver's an estimated $11.8 billion advertising market. We are getting such a small share of that I'm pretty confident that if we can increase it just a microcosm, we'll see some bill benefits. We think that in most of our communities we're the #1 website. That's a good thing to have in terms of impressions. Our readership survey, just to go through that pretty quick, on our print product, people spend between 20 and 25 minutes reading our print product, and most community newspapers average 15, so we think that's good. 83% of the purchases, 83% of our readers say they make purchases or buy services through things they see in our newspaper. 67% of our readers are female, and they make the majority of the purchasing decisions. Our median household income, this is all of our papers, Adams County, Jefferson County, Arapahoe County, Elbert County, Douglas County. Our median household income of our readership is $100,000. The U.S. average is $54,000, so we're almost twice the U.S. average for the median. And only 36.5% of our readers are loyal Denver Post readers. So we're capturing a whole other market that the dailies don't capture. So I'm more optimistic this year than I have been for a long time, and thank you for your attention today, and thanks for the Coalition for inviting me here today.
I'm going to ask Jerry a couple of questions, and then we're going to open it up to the group as well. So Jerry, as a fellow experienced entrepreneur, what would be some positive advice that you may give to a budding entrepreneur here in the room this evening?
Try to get on with a place like this. There's so many people out there who want to help an entrepreneur. And there's a lot of good organizations that do it, but this is one of the best. I would say this is a great place to start, and he didn't ask me to say that. But we help with the Clean Tech Open. We help the startups in the clean energy space. And one after another said that this was such a great experience that they came through, because we accelerate the ability to get to market. And in today's world, that's really important.
You mentioned the tension between journalists and PR firms. And do you believe that there is pressure on journalists to cater to the moneyed interest, to bring in revenue? And if so, how does your company help to guard against this?
When I started in 1982 at the Miami Herald, we were on different floors advertising in the newsroom. And that had been the tradition in our business for a long time. There was a big barrier. I wouldn't have met my wife if she didn't play softball and I played softball on the co-ed softball team. I mean, you just didn't meet each other. And that's starting to shift a little bit. We're starting to mix advertising in the newsroom on the same floor. So more than anything else, so the newsroom starts to see that there's a whole other side of the business that's important, that everybody knows that the newsroom's important. Without the news, we don't have a product. So we're starting to see that. But I don't think there's a whole lot of pressure on the newsroom right now to cater to PR firms. Every so often, I might see something come through that I think is important for a lot of different reasons, and I might ship it to the newsroom. I think that probably has a little bit more sway than just anybody else doing it. But most of the time, the newsroom, I don't interfere with the newsroom, and I'm in charge of the business side more than anything else, so I don't interfere. And I think most of the publishers understand that our credibility is everything. And if we lose that credibility, we lose our readership.
Valid point. What questions do you all have of Jerry?
I have a comment.
Yes, Laurel?
We gave up the Denver Post probably a couple years ago, and you're right, the only thing I read is the Parker Chronicle, and I look forward to it every week because I miss the tangible newspaper. So, and it's free. I mean, it's delivered, it's there, and it's going to be there on Friday. And so I think it's something to look forward to on a weekly. It gets you caught up with your community, and I'm very appreciative and thankful. I didn't realize until my son was in the paper that he was in everybody's paper online. Because when I Googled it, it was the Highlands Ranch, the Castle Rock, so the same article went, but it went all in the southern area, and I didn't realize it was all connected throughout the state.
Yeah.
Denver metro area.
You bet. So Laura's comment was that she appreciates that she has the community newspaper and that it shows up for free and it's tangible and lets her be connected with her community. You want to comment on anything about that?
Yeah. One of the things I didn't mention is that that's what we produce every week. We do this 52 times a year. This is just this week's. And we do share some news and some content, but not a lot. I don't know what your son did, but no, we played a lot of positive stuff. Could have been great. It probably was great. If it's Douglas County schools, we'll print that in all of our Douglas County papers. If it's so we'll print it in all the Douglas County papers. If it's specific to that community, if it's something the Parker City Council's doing, it's just going to run in Parker. And on Google, I have no clue what Google does and how they do it. They won't tell us. They don't share it. But they do. They are now putting their spiders on our websites. It took us a lot of effort to get there. And we are being searched and indexed, and we are doing quite well on search. And it's part of it is because they didn't, if I had your son's story and I had the URL, 6 different URLs for that story, Google didn't like that. They thought that we were doing something to try to manipulate Google. So we've done something where it might run in have one URL, and it somehow or another magically it still shows up if you Google Parker or Douglas. If you were to Google Douglas County Schools, it might show up in all within those websites all 6 times. But thank you for being a good reader. Appreciate that. And
What other questions we have? Yes.
Yes. So earlier you had mentioned your new digital advertising capabilities. I actually worked a long time ago for Colorado Business Magazine, Wisdom Publishing. And what are some of the new roles that you have to think up of these new ad units and to think up of these new, targeting capabilities that you have, and then arm your salespeople with that information? What are some of the new roles that have come up?
So the question is, what are some of the new roles you're having to implement or think about as it relates to digital advertising and other methods?
everyone comes to me for the most part because we have what we call the feet on the street. So there's really very few local advertising salespeople in Parker or Highlands Ranch, but I have those. So a lot of the new technologies come to us and ask us to pick up their technology because they can't afford, if they're sitting in Dallas and they've come up with a new widget, they can't afford to hit the whole country. So they're all looking to partner with someone, and we have the feet on the street, which is why I think Gannett just made an offer for Tribune Publishing, which is the LA Times and Chicago Tribune. I think we're going to see that consolidation so that they have feet on the street throughout the whole country. I think we're going to see that. The other thing is that we go to conferences and we share things. At my level, we're not building anything. I try to find best of breed and partner with the right people.
Yes. Very to you, Chris. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes.
So something to comment on, I pulled it up with the huge consolidation in the media, right? So it reads in 1983, 90% of the U.S. media was controlled by 50 companies. Today it's controlled by 6.
Wow.
So I'd like you to comment on that and what's your view of that.
So the question is that 1990, 90% of the media was controlled by 50 companies, and now it's controlled by 6. And the question is, what are your thoughts on that trend?
The Department of Justice is still looking at media. The Tribune Publishing, before they had this, I don't know if it's a hostile takeover that's going on. I'm not sure if it's that bad, but they made an offer on the Orange County Register, and the DOJ came in and said, no go. You can't have L.A., San Diego, and Orange County. And so they came in and they're still watching it. So that's a real deep question. I don't really know long term if it gets down to less than 6, what that means. I mean, we've seen it. It's not just newspapers. We've seen it in radio, seen it in television. You're seeing it in all the large media. But the thing about what's going on in the world today, everything's so splintered that it's still going to be, even if somebody controlled the message for all the newspapers in the whole country, there's just so many other forms of media. I don't know how much control they're going to have, except that they have direct access to leaders. And that would be an interesting thing. Like I mentioned earlier, if I want to, as a newspaper publisher, I can still get on the phone and talk to Mike Kaufman or Senator Bennett. I had a meeting with last year, one-on-one, and that's one of the cool things about being a publisher. But at my level, I can do that. If you are the chairman of the board of Gannett Media, I can only imagine what doors are open to that individual.
Interesting. Let's take one last question. Chris?
You made a reference earlier, Brian, with respect to a local paper in North Carolina protecting the community. I was just wondering for you, Jerry, how do you view protecting the community as one of the foundations of what you're doing to have owning these newspapers?
The question from Chris is, how do you view protecting the community as one of the goals for your newspaper publications?
That's everything to us. That's the watchdog, and we went through a kind of a branding exercise, and the people in charge of the branding didn't like that term. They see that as watchdog. That's the bulldog at the gate, or the German Shepherd at the junkyard. That's how they see that. And so we may need to recoin that term somehow or another, but that's how people see us, as the watchdog. And that's everything to us. And I mentioned a couple of stories where we made a difference. We drill that into our journalists every day, is that, yeah, we want to cover the good kid doing good stuff, and we want to cover one of the top things that we in our readership survey, people want to read about other people, and they want to read good stuff. So, our journalists, to my wife and I, sometimes might think we're a little soft because we are looking for that too, but that's what our readers want. They don't want to open up the Parker Chronicle and see all the negative stuff, all of it. But we've been right there with the whole Douglas County Schools issue all the way through, and our readership study came back and said we had some people saying that we were on the side of the conservatives, and some people said we were on the side of the liberals. Unfortunately, in Douglas County Schools, it has become a political issue in some cases. The latest board is trying not to do that, but for a little while it was, and I thought that was good. That means that we are right down the middle, and that's important to us, but we have covered that so closely that there were times where there were 5 stories about Douglas County Schools in our paper. So we take that watchdog issue very seriously. On the editorial side, we are currently not doing editorials and opinion pages. They're very time-consuming to do right. We do endorse candidates, and we see that as very important. And one of the reasons why we do that is not so because my opinion is so much better than any of your opinions, but you don't have the time to give an hour to every one of the candidates and look them eyeball to eyeball, and you probably aren't going to get that opportunity to do it very often unless you go to a debate, and even then the questions are only going to be what the moderator asks. So it's very important for us to do that, and we have, with my reporters and my editors and things, we're seeing what's going on in trends in the community, so we feel like we are someone that can make a recommendation on who to vote for.
Great. Let's give Jerry a round of applause. Thank you. So with each of our speakers, I like to pick out a few of their golden nuggets, at least golden nuggets to me. So if they're not golden to you, just ignore what I'm about ready to say. So number 1, making good decisions is a must. Number 2, if you control the media, you control the message. Compare that to what was just said about this combining and who is actually controlling the media. Our worldview is what we read and what we see. And it's pretty fascinating to see what is being controlled in that fashion. Number 3, the government is creating its own content, sending messages directly to you. One could make a case that could be a good thing. One could make a case that could be a very dangerous thing. I'm unsure if our founding fathers ever thought about where we would be today in the instant media world that we live in. Number 4, media is the watchdog of our communities. Until you come up with a different word, we're going to keep using watchdog here at the Opportunity Coalition. Number 5, it's probably, this is one of the lessons, but I thought it was so good. And at first I thought, wow, he's just being a little bit pessimistic. But after giving the story, I think it should be one of the lessons learned. Number 5, it's probably worse than you think, and there will be surprises. Sometimes lots of surprises. If you enter a venture and have as many surprises as Jerry had, I wish you all the best. And number 6, hindsight being 20/20, I would have cut faster. And that's a really, really tough one. I went through the down economy, and it's the first time in our 16-year history that I had to lay off people. And these people were my friends. These people are people that I went through the trenches with. And we did everything we could to hold on as many employees as long as we could. But eventually we had to let people go as well just to be able to survive. And it's such a blessing and an honor to hire all those people back. And now we're in the opposite economy where you can't find employees in Denver anymore, given where it's at. So, our upcoming speaker series. We are packed through the end of the year. On June 16th, we have Aaron Harbour, host of the American Civility and the Aaron Harbour Show. If you don't know much about him, he's just a great guy, interviews a lot of amazing people, and I think you'll really enjoy that one. On July 14th, we have Brian Voigt, CEO of the Denver Botanic Gardens. August 11th, Dick Monfort, owner and chairman and CEO of the Colorado Rockies. September 15th, Cynthia Kaufman, the Attorney General of Colorado. October 20th, Stuart Sanderson, president of the Colorado Mining Association. You know, we often overlook the impact, the economic impact and job impact of mining in Colorado, and it's very important that we learn more about that. November 10th, Jamie Van Leeuwen, Executive Director of the Global Livingston Institute and Senior Advisor to Governor Hickenlooper. I was just with him at the Capitol, and it's just fascinating to see some of the projects he's doing, not only here locally, but in Africa and other places to create opportunity for people. And lastly, on December 15th, we have Thomas Frey, Senior Futurist at the Da Vinci Institute. This is a guy that hangs out with people like Elon Musk, talking about what is our world going to look like in a few years and decades from now. And my gut tells me it's going to look a lot different than it does today. With that, I want to thank all of you for coming. Hope to see you in the future, and feel free to invite any friends. Thank you so much.